When people talk about the signature sound of the Doors, they almost always point to the same two things: Jim Morrison's haunting baritone and Ray Manzarek's hypnotic organ bass lines. But if you strip away the poetry and the keyboards, you'll find the actual heartbeat of the band. A rhythmic engine that didn't sound like anyone else in Los Angeles in the 1960s. The true dynamic force of the Doors was John Densmore.
The reason we're still around is the drumming. That's true.
Yeah.
While other rock drummers of the era were trying to bash their kits like Keith Moon or lay down heavy backbeats, John brought a completely different pedigree to the drum riser. He was heavily trained in the strict, rudimental precision of high school marching bands, which gave him total control over his snare dynamics. But his true obsession was jazz. When he was invited to jam with a new local group, he didn't bring standard rock beats. He brought the swinging, sophisticated flavor of jazz giants like Elvin Jones and Art Blakey into a psychedelic rock space.
Ray, the keyboard player, said, "Hey, I hear you're a drummer. Come on over to my garage and we'll jam."
I go down to Ray's parents' garage to jam with this band.
Yep.
And Jim is so fucking shy. He won't sing. He's in the corner. So the first song, I say, "Hey, Ray, you know All Blues by Miles Davis?" And he goes, "Yeah." And we played it.
We're not trying to be jazz musicians, but we're influenced by them.
They weren't an overnight sensation. Before they were packing stadiums or sparking riots, they had to grind it out in the gritty underbelly of the Sunset Strip. They were a weird, dark, jazz-influenced rock band trying to find their footing in an industry that didn't know what to do with them.
This used to be the London Fog, a dingy nautical club where we had our first gig. And I have very fond memories of the whiskey. We really played with heart and soul every night from 9 p.m. till 2 a.m. for rent money. And those are good times. I had no idea that it was going to be that dark of a band, you know. Just four guys, you know, we're going to get out there and do it.
What made the Doors truly revolutionary wasn't just the dark atmosphere. It was how John physically played the drums. In a standard rock band, the drummer locks in with the bass player to drive a riff. But John didn't play to a riff. He played to Jim Morrison's voice. He treated Jim like a jazz horn player. He was constantly listening, reacting, and interpreting the frontman's emotions. If Jim whispered, John dropped down to delicate ghost notes. If Jim screamed, John dropped a bomb on the kick drum. He was literally scoring Jim's poetry in real time.
I'm an accompanist. I'm not a solo drummer. When I hear shit, I feel out how to enhance it. On that song, I made this choice of not playing snares because of Robbie's dark, moody raga sound. I'm doing tablas on drums.
He brought that same highly tuned ear into the recording studio, constantly pushing the band to experiment with tones, dampening, and unconventional techniques to serve the song.
I didn't know that you could get a more dampened drum sound, and that sounded better. I thought you just play live, and so I was apprehensive of that, but then I learned to love it.
Let's treat the studio as the fifth door.
Yeah.
Let's get into this. Let's have fun and experiment, you know, do backward stuff.
But John wasn't just holding down the groove. He was the anchor for a frontman who was rapidly transforming. In the early days, John watched Jim morph from a painfully shy poet who sang with his back to the audience into a chaotic, mythical figure.
He faced us in the London Fog, like we were rehearsing. The audience, wow, look at his back. And he got the courage to turn around, and I thought, fuck, this is not the next Mick Jagger, I don't know. And then I realized, oh, he's sort of developing this persona, like my chord is a snake and he's the lizard king or something.
Jim couldn't sing, but he had words that were just magic.
We had a hunch we were making some good stuff. And our karma was to have this kamikaze maniac singer, but he had these pipes and these lyrics and melodies. Oh my God, this guy's gifted.
But as the band exploded into massive global fame, that kamikaze energy became a nightmare to manage. John was a meticulous, highly disciplined musician, and he found himself trying to keep time for a frontman who was spiraling completely out of control.
And I had a big mouth about timing, so I would be there with all the edits, you know, because it has to be absolutely precise or it can happen. Jim, as you know, took acid and didn't tell us. We're at the Hollywood fucking Bowl, and I was so frustrated. Third album, I threw my sticks down, I quit in the middle of the studio. I came back the next day. How am I going to give that up?
John had to sit behind his drum kit and helplessly watch the magic they had built in the garage slowly get dismantled by addiction, excess, and an industry that pushed them to the brink.
As his self-destruction increased, we kind of backed away. We were so great, and then
Jim did call me from Paris, and I was the last one in the band to speak to him. The phone call was mainly asking me how LA Woman was doing.
After Jim Morrison's tragic death, you would think the music world would finally step back and recognize John Densmore for the undeniable rhythmic genius he is. For the next 50 years, nearly every time a microphone was put in his face, the interviewer didn't want to talk about his brilliant bossa nova beat on Break On Through or his flawless press rolls. They only wanted to ask about the myth of the Lizard King.
The bright spotlight on the lead singer is kind of dangerous. Everybody projects. I was just on the side, so I just got a little singed.
But while the press remained obsessed with the Jim Morrison mythology, John quietly became the fierce, unsung guardian of the Doors' actual legacy. When massive corporations came waving multi-million-dollar checks to turn their psychedelic art into car commercials, John was the one who hit the brakes to protect the band's integrity.
We okayed Riders on the Storm for a tire commercial in England only, and I came to my senses and gave all my money to charity.
His dedication to the purity of the music was so absolute that when his own surviving bandmates tried to tour under the Doors' name with a replacement singer, John took them to court to stop it. He refused to let the art they created be cheapened into a nostalgic cash grab.
The late, great Ray Manzarek, our keyboard player, and Robbie Krieger, our guitar player, kind of ran off with the name. And they did one gig, and I was cool with that. And then they did a whole tour, and I called them and said, what changed the name? I mean, the Doors without Jim is like the Stones without Mick. That's ludicrous, let alone yours truly. And they didn't. And so I had to enter a legal struggle. And I got Jim's estate to join me, which pleased me very much. I chose not to play. Why would I want to do the songs with a Jimitator?
John Densmore isn't just a guy who got lucky and played a backbeat for a famous poet. He is an endlessly curious artist who brought a profound sense of taste to rock and roll, and he continues to push his own creative boundaries to this day, completely outside the shadow of the Doors.
I've played recently with the African musicians and Iranian musicians, and it rearranges my brain cells.
At the end of the day, despite the tragedy, the chaos, and the media circus, John still honors what they accomplished. Because before the myth, before the riots, and before the tragedy, they were just four musicians who tapped into something transcendent.
Being in a band is polygamy without the sex. It's very close knit, and you're brothers, and if you're not in the band, you can't quite know that feeling, but there's a really deep love of each other. Much gratitude.